everyone, and welcome back. We're diving deep today. Into the reactions and reflections within the Black community after this recent election.
Yeah.
And we're focusing specifically on the experiences of Black women.
Really fascinating area to get into.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Our source material is this really insightful blog post called Harvesting Wisdom, Reflections on Resilience, Liberation, and Hope Post-Election.
Oh, wow.
By Amber Sessoms.
Okay.
She's brought together all these different voices and perspectives, and we're going to unpack some pretty heavy themes today.
Yeah.
Like disappointment and resilience and unity and the importance of moving forward together.
It's amazing how she curates this collection of voices.
Yeah.
To paint such a vivid picture of this really specific moment. It's raw and it's honest.
Yeah.
And it really highlights the emotional depth of what so many Black women are experiencing right now.
Absolutely. And one of the first things that really struck me was that wave of disappointment Sessoms captures.
Yeah.
Particularly around Vice President Kamala Harris's loss. Lene Vanay, who's quoted in the blog post, puts it so powerfully.
Okay.
She says, "America did not choose a Black woman. Go figure racism was on the ballot and y'all chose it."
Wow.
That's
heavy.
It hit me right in the chest.
Yeah, it's a gut punch for sure.
Yeah.
It speaks to the immense weight of expectation.
Yeah.
That so many Black women carry.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to politics.
Yeah.
You know? It's like they're expected to shoulder the hopes of this entire community.
Right.
To embody this ideal of progress. And when those hopes are dashed against the rocks, of systemic realities.
Yeah.
It's a deeply personal blow.
It reminds me of that feeling you get when you're really rooting for your team to win the championship.
Oh, yeah.
And they're so close.
Oh, yeah.
And then they just fall short. It's more than disappointment.
Uh-huh.
It's almost a sense of grief.
Exactly. And Sessoms doesn't shy away from that rawness at all.
No.
She includes Jasmine Walker's reaction.
Yeah.
Who just calls it a crushing blow. A slap in the face.
Yeah.
There's no sugarcoating it.
No. And even Baltimore Mayor Brandon Scott weighed in.
Oh, wow.
Speaking about the deep disrespect that Black women face, despite their tireless contributions to this country, it's like their efforts are constantly being minimized, overlooked, taken for granted.
It's a painful reality.
Yeah.
And this collective disappointment that Sessoms is capturing really speaks volumes about the emotional labor that's so often demanded of Black women.
Mm-hmm.
They're expected to be strong and resilient, to hold everything together.
Right.
And yet they're rarely given the space to fully express their own hurt and frustration.
Absolutely. And it makes Kamala Harris's call for hope in her concession speech even more poignant.
Yeah.
She urges people to never give up on making the world a better place.
Mm-hmm.
But it feels different hearing those words now against the backdrop of this collective heartbreak.
It does. It adds a layer of complexity to her message.
Yeah.
It's not just about blind optimism.
Right.
It's about acknowledging the pain, processing it, and then finding the strength to keep fighting for a better future.
It's that resilience.
Exactly.
Right.
It's that refusal to be defeated, even when the odds are stacked against you.
Absolutely. And Sessoms uses this sense of disappointment as a springboard to explore something even deeper.
Okay.
She dives into how this election exposed the deeply ingrained systems of control and white supremacy that continue to shape our political landscape.
So we're moving beyond the immediate emotional reactions.
Right.
And starting to analyze the larger forces at play here.
Exactly.
One of the voices Sessoms includes is Erica Hart.
Okay.
Who argues that white women who voted for Trump weren't voting against their own interests, but rather to maintain a sense of control.
Wow.
Particularly over the bodies of others.
That's a pretty bold statement.
Yeah.
It's definitely making me think about the motivations behind political choices in a different light.
It's a challenging perspective.
Yeah.
But when you consider it alongside other perspectives within the Black community, it reveals a pattern of how power dynamics influence decisions.
And Keith Boykin adds another layer to this analysis.
Okay.
By pointing out that for many white voters, Trump's actions and policies didn't seem to matter as much as his persona.
Interesting.
Boykin suggests that it's not really a specific policies, but about something much deeper.
Yeah.
Something tied to race and gender anxieties in a changing America.
Like there's this unspoken fear of losing power and privilege. And that fear overrides any rational assessment of political platforms or candidates.
And Dr. Tressie McMillan Cottom's analysis really struck me.
What does she have to say?
She talks about how white supremacy often operates by protecting the comfort and control of white people, even at the expense of others. She argues that many white voters prioritize maintaining their own perceived superiority within these existing systems, regardless of the impact on other communities.
It's a really insightful way to frame it.
Yeah.
It's not always about overt racism or hate,
right,
but about a more insidious form of self-preservation that reinforces the status quo.
Right.
It's like this unwritten rule book that says our comfort matters more than your well-being.
It's that unspoken assumption of power.
Right.
That's so hard to dismantle because it's woven into the very fabric of our society.
Exactly. And that's why Sesam's exploration of this theme is so important.
Yeah.
She's pushing us to look beyond surface-level explanations and to confront these deep-rooted systems that continue to perpetuate inequality.
It's heavy stuff.
Yeah.
But it feels necessary.
I agree.
Like, if we're going to have any hope of creating a more just and equitable world, we have to be willing to confront these uncomfortable truths.
Absolutely.
So where does Sesam's take us from here? Right?
What other layers are there to uncover in this post-election landscape?
Well, it's interesting because Sesam's doesn't just stop at, like, analyzing these systemic issues.
Okay.
She also dives into the complexities within the Black community itself.
Right.
Particularly, in moments like this.
Yeah.
Where there's so much disappointment and frustration.
Okay, so what kind of complexities is she talking about?
Well, she highlights this tension between the need for unity
and
the reality of, like, intra-community conflict.
Right.
It's like in moments of collective pain, sometimes that pain gets kind of misdirected inwards.
That makes sense. It's like when you're feeling hurt and vulnerable, it can be easier to lash out at those closest to you.
Yeah.
Rather than confronting the larger forces at play.
Exactly. And Sesam's brings in this really powerful quote from Dante Kyle that kind of illustrates this perfectly.
Okay.
He says, "All you've been doing is hunting yourself this whole time when there's a very clear enemy."
Whoa. That's a powerful image.
Right?
It's like we're so focused on fighting each other that we lose sight of the real battle.
Right. And Sesam's even shares a personal anecdote about almost getting into an online argument.
Oh, wow.
Admitting that it's so easy to get caught up in these cycles of anger and blame within the community.
It's almost like we're all carrying this collective trauma, this generational pain.
Yeah.
And sometimes it spills over in ways that hurt each other.
Absolutely. And Sesam's connects this to Joyanne Reed's critique of the narratives that often pit Black and brown communities against each other. Reed calls this the white innocence narrative.
Okay.
Where the blame for political outcomes is kind of shifted onto marginalized groups.
Yeah.
Effectively letting white voters off the hook.
I've definitely seen that play out in the media.
Right.
It's like instead of holding those in power accountable, they point fingers at communities of color saying, oh, if only they had voted differently.
Exactly. It's a classic divide and conquer tactic.
And Reed backs up her point by actually breaking down exit poll data.
Okay.
Showing that it was mathematically impossible for Black and brown voters to be the deciding factor in Trump's win.
So she's calling out the absurdity of that blame game.
Right. And this is where Sesam's introduces this really interesting concept of collective liberation.
Okay.
Using a quote from Ijeoma Oluo that really drives home the interconnectedness of our struggles.
Okay.
Oluo says, we have the same oppressors.
Yeah.
And wherever they are strong, it will come back on us.
Yeah.
Our liberation is joined.
That's powerful. It's saying that we can't achieve true freedom for anyone until we dismantle the systems that oppress everyone.
Exactly. And this requires challenging what are called carceral mindsets.
Okay.
It's about moving away from punitive approaches to justice and instead focusing on healing and transformation.
Yeah.
And addressing the root causes of harm.
So instead of just locking people up, we need to be asking, why are people committing these crimes in the first place? What systemic factors are contributing to this?
Precisely. And to illustrate this point, Sesam's includes a TikTok.
Okay.
That a friend of yours shared.
Oh, yeah.
Which talks about the need to interrupt cycles of violence and get out of these colonial white supremacist mindsets.
Oh, yeah. That one really resonated with me. It's about unlearning those harmful ways of thinking.
Yeah.
That say punishment is the only solution.
Right.
It's about creating systems of support and accountability that actually help people thrive.
And Ijeoma Oluo puts it so bluntly, saying punishment is cop behavior.
Wow.
And it is the opposite of the freedom that we've been trying to get.
It's like we're so conditioned to think in terms of punishment and retribution that we forget about the possibility of redemption and restoration.
Right. And remember that story your friend shared about how society's whole concept of good and bad is so messed up?
Yeah.
It challenges us to rethink our entire moral framework.
Yeah.
And to reject this urge to wish harm on anyone,
right,
including ourselves.
It's a call for radical compassion, even in the face of injustice and wrongdoing.
Exactly. And Catherine Willebogen takes this even further.
Okay.
Arguing against this idea that anyone deserves to suffer because of their political choices. Yeah. She says this whole notion of deservingness is rooted in white supremacist thinking.
So it's not about judging people or condemning them for their beliefs, but about creating a system where everyone has the opportunity to grow, to learn, to change.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And Sessoms includes a shout out to UK TikToker Kima Otong, who celebrates Black American women as exceptional change makers, highlighting their global impact.
And that's a really important point. Black women have been leading movements for social justice and liberation for generations. Their influence and impact are undeniable.
Absolutely. And recognizing their contributions is crucial as we move towards this vision of collective liberation. But Sessoms also takes a critical look at something she calls symbolic activism.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot lately. There's so much emphasis on showing support.
Right.
But sometimes it feels like it's more about making the supporter feel good than actually creating meaningful change.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to illustrate this point, Sessoms brings in the example of the blue bracelet movement.
Oh, yeah.
Which encouraged people to wear a blue bracelet to signify that they weren't part of the 52% of white women who voted for Trump.
Right.
Desiree B. Stevens, who Sessoms quotes, points out that this movement, while well-intentioned, placed the burden of healing on marginalized communities without addressing the systemic issues at hand.
So it's like saying, hey, look at me. I'm not one of those bad white women.
Yeah.
But not actually doing the work to dismantle the systems that allowed Trump to gain power in the first place.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And this ties back to what Dr. Tressie McMillan Cottom was saying about white people voting to maintain control and comfort. Symbolic activism in this context becomes a way to uphold existing power structures rather than disrupt them.
It's almost like a way to assuage guilt.
Right.
Without actually making any sacrifices or challenging the status quo.
Yeah.
It's prioritizing optics over impact.
Right. And Sessoms brings in Cole Arthur Riley, who shared a powerful passage from Audre Lorde about the emotional labor that's often expected of women of color.
Yeah.
Lorde talks about how women of color are often tasked with educating white women about racism, which can be emotionally draining and ultimately unproductive.
It's like instead of doing their own work to unpack their biases and complicity, they expect marginalized communities to do it for them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Sessoms highlights this viral TikTok by Drinkable Brian.
Oh, yeah, I saw that one.
You did?
He was calling out all those white women who were messaging him.
Yeah.
Desperately seeking a way to signal that they weren't part of the 52% who voted for Trump.
Yes. And he was basically saying, look, wearing a bracelet doesn't change anything.
Right.
If you really want to make a difference, have those tough conversations with your friends and family.
Yeah.
Hold each other accountable.
Yeah.
And work to dismantle the systems that uphold white supremacy.
It's about moving beyond performative allyship.
Right.
And actually putting in the work to create meaningful change.
Exactly. And Lana Vanny echoes this sentiment, pleading with allies to move beyond symbolic gestures and actually protect those on the front lines of social justice movements.
She's calling for concrete action.
Yeah.
For a willingness to put oneself on the line in solidarity.
Yes.
With those most affected by injustice.
True solidarity requires more than just words or hashtags.
Right.
It requires putting your body and your resources on the line.
And it's a stark contrast to that comfort and control that Dr. Tressie McMillan Cottom was talking about earlier. Symbolic activism often centers that comfort, while true solidarity requires a willingness to disrupt it.
Exactly. And that's why Sessoms doesn't just critique symbolic activism.
Okay.
But she also offers this really powerful alternative.
What's that?
She talks about the importance of rest and hope as radical acts of resistance.
That's interesting. How does she connect those things to resistance? I mean, resting and hoping don't exactly sound like revolutionary acts.
Well, she starts by sharing this message from Lina Vanny, who acknowledges her own tiredness and disappointment, but also affirms her unwavering hope. Venet describes hope as gritty, bruised, wounded, but ultimately unshakable.
It reminds me of that saying, hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul.
Yes.
Even when the world feels dark, hope keeps singing its song.
Yes. And Venet goes on to say, so hope must be a Black woman.
Wow.
It's a really powerful statement about the enduring strength and resilience of Black women in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles.
Right.
Well, they carry that hope. They nurture it, and they refuse to let it be extinguished.
It's a reminder that hope isn't about ignoring the pain or pretending that everything is okay. It's about choosing to believe in a better future, even when the present is difficult.
Exactly. And Sessoms brings in a quote from Sonia Renee Taylor.
Okay.
That I think perfectly encapsulates this sentiment. Taylor says, "It is a miracle that we contended with an entire ecosystem that told us we were not enough, and we desired to disrupt that."
Wow, that's beautiful.
Right.
It's recognizing the sheer strength and courage it takes to even imagine a different reality, let alone fight for it.
Right. And Sessoms uses Malcolm X's powerful knife analogy.
I love that analogy.
To highlight this need for deep systemic transformation.
Yeah.
He said, pulling a knife partway out of someone's back isn't progress.
Right.
The real progress is in healing the wound itself.
It's not enough to just address the symptoms of oppression.
Right.
We have to get to the root of the problem and create systems that are truly just and equitable.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And Sessoms brings in her own personal experience here, talking about her dissertation research on Black women's identity development in online spaces.
Oh, tell me more about that.
Well, she found that these online spaces became these powerful tools for resilience and growth.
Interesting.
They offered Black women a place to connect and share their stories and build community.
That's so inspiring. It's like, even in the digital realm, Black women are creating these spaces for healing and collective empowerment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Sessoms connects this to the post-election moment.
Yeah.
Emphasizing how Black women are continuing to create these spaces for reflection and support, both online and offline.
Yeah.
And she highlights her own 3D power retreats
as
an extension of this work.
Okay.
Offering a tangible space for Black women to rest, connect, and heal.
That sounds incredible.
Yeah.
It's about creating a space where Black women can step back from the demands of the world and focus on their own well-being and growth.
Exactly. And Sessoms concludes by invoking the words of Toni Morrison, who said, "This is precisely the time when artists go to work. There is no time for despair, no place for self-pity, no need for silence, no room for fear. We speak, we write, we dance, we sing, we paint, we sculpt, we create."
Chills. It's a powerful reminder that even in the darkest of times, we can still create beauty and meaning.
Absolutely.
Art becomes a form of resistance.
Yes.
A way to reclaim our power and speak our truth.
And Sessoms reminds us that, she's not just offering commentary on the election, but inviting us into a process of collective healing and transformation.
Okay, so how do we move forward?
Yeah.
What are some of the key takeaways from Sessoms' exploration that we can apply to our own lives?
It feels like she's giving us like a roadmap, or at least like a compass, for navigating these really complex emotional and political landscapes.
Absolutely. What are some of the specific things she suggests we focus on?
Well, Sessoms poses these really thought-provoking questions at the end of her piece.
Okay.
Questions that kind of invite us to go deeper and do some serious self-reflection. For example, she asks, what narratives about Black womanhood have influenced how you see yourself?
Oh.
And how can you contribute to building spaces that honor the unique experiences of Black women?
Those are powerful questions. Like she's saying, okay, we've acknowledged the pain, we've analyzed the systems now, let's turn inward and examine our own beliefs and actions. How are we complicit in upholding these narratives, and what can we do to disrupt them?
Exactly. And she challenges us to think about the spaces we inhabit, both physical and digital. Are they truly inclusive?
Right.
Do they center the voices and experiences of Black women? And if not, how can we contribute to creating those spaces?
It's a call to action, not just for Black women, but for all of us.
Right.
We all have a role to play in dismantling these systems of oppression.
And remember those 3D power retreats we talked about?
Yeah.
They're a tangible example of what it looks like to create a space specifically for Black women to rest, connect, and heal. It's about recognizing that self-care and community care are essential forms of resistance.
Absolutely. You can't pour from an empty cup.
Right.
And sometimes you need to step back from the front lines and replenish your spirit so you can keep fighting.
And ultimately, I think Sesam's piece leaves us with this sense of hope.
Yeah.
This sense that even in the face of these like deep-seated challenges, there's still so much we can do to create a more just and equitable world.
It's about reclaiming our power individually and collectively.
Absolutely.
And it's about refusing to give up on the dream of a world where everyone can thrive.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what are you taking away from Sesam's exploration?
For me, it's that reminder about the importance of moving beyond symbolic gestures and engaging in the deeper work of dismantling oppressive systems.
Yeah.
It's about recognizing the interconnectedness of our struggles and working together towards collective liberation.
Right.
And it's about holding on to hope even when the world feels dark.
Beautifully said. And for me, I'm left with this question. What does transformative solidarity look like in your own life?
Oh, wow.
What steps can you take today to move beyond performative allyship and towards meaningful action?
That's a question I hope all of our listeners will grapple with.
Yeah.
The journey towards a more just and equitable world is ongoing, and it requires all of us to show up, to speak out, and to never stop fighting for what's right.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Amber Sesam's powerful reflections.
Yeah.
Stay curious, stay engaged, and keep asking those tough questions.
Until next time, stay curious, everyone.